speakers introduce themselves and their organisations in a moment, but just before we start, I wanted to give a bit of context around how today's event came about, and why we felt it was important to put on a webinar session about responsible business. So this webinar came about because the three of us, the three businesses, Genie Consulting, Positive About Inclusion and Venture Zero, kept having similar conversations with clients, but all from different angles. And we're all seeing organisations wanting to do the right thing around environmental sustainability, supporting employee mental health and wellbeing, and creating diverse and inclusive workplaces, but often feeling underwhelmed, overwhelmed, and unsure of where to start. And in addition to that, in a lot of instances, these areas are often siloed within a business, or they're added on as an extra to somebody else's role. And I'm pretty sure I know some of you on this call now could verify that, because I know that's been the case in your organisation. So today is about bringing all of these areas together and showing the synergy that exists between them, and demonstrating that demonstrating that business works best when people, planet and purpose are all considered together and not in isolation. So that's enough from me. I'm going to get the panelists to introduce themselves and their businesses now, and then we shall start off with the questions. So I'm going to start with Karen Faulkner, who is from Positive About Inclusion.
Thank you, Claire. Yes, hello, everyone. As Claire said, my name's Karen Faulkner. I'm one of the directors and co-founders of Positive About Inclusion. We are a social enterprise that delivers equity, diversity and inclusion training and consultancy services. We work with organisations across the country, supporting them, helping them to deliver on their EDI ambitions. That's us in a nutshell.
Thank you, Karen. And I'm going to move to Jo from Genie Consulting.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. I'm Jo Holmes. I work with an organisation called Genie Consulting. We're a northeast-based environmental consultancy service, and we are the northern hub for investors in the environment, which is a nationally recognised environmental accreditation. And so we look, I'll speak a bit more about it after, but we look really holistically at organisations, and we pull in all different areas of their operation in terms of trying to pull together this wider agenda, which is why I wanted to be involved today.
Thank you, Jo. And last but not least, Claire Blunt from Venture Zero.
Hello. So I am the other part of Venture Zero to Claire Few. So we're easy to remember, the two Claires. We are primarily provide training in the first instance, and all of our training is around sustainability, mental health and well-being. So we have lots of different training courses, lots of different support we can offer in that area, but we also have our impact network, which is where we look at everything to do with sustainable well-being. So bringing in health and well-being, community and environment. It's all about education. It's all about making connections, bringing people together, which is why we're really happy to do this today as well. We provide event support in terms of speaking, and again, providing more information around those three key areas and how you can get your wins in all of them.
Thank you. I'm actually going to pose just a quick question to the audience now. So if you can just pop in the chat, in a word or phrase, because one word might be a bit difficult, what does responsible business mean to you or your organisation? Just going to give you a second to write that, and I realise I'm going to put my chat so I can see it. Transparency. I like that, Anne. Definitely. Transparency and integrity. Strong ethics. Community. Thank you, Ellie. Ethical and people first. Yeah, all great things coming through there. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Purpose over profit. Okay, well, I'm going to, as a couple of people just finished typing that, I'm going to pose the first question to the panel, and that is, what are the drivers for organisations to be a responsible business? And I'm going to start with Jo, please, if you'd like to answer that.
Yeah, sure. There are so many. There are absolutely tons. when we work in businesses, we find sort of the sustainability element of being a responsible business is an entry point for some organisations. The benefits are vast and very people driven, but also come down to cost savings. They come down to recruiting and retaining staff. They come down to improving reputation, sales. But one of the biggest drivers I've seen in recent years is supply chain pressure. So more so from the NHS supply chain, they are being asked to look at this in larger contracts going out. They're looking at social value, which sustainability is part of that. So there's a real supply chain driver of why. And one of my little anecdotes is we had a client who said, you know, this is all well and good, Joe, and I'll be honest with you, I'm only doing it to stay on the NHS register. And for me, it doesn't really matter why somebody started the journey, but you could see him blossom and really grasp of why it was beneficial to the organisation as a whole. So yeah, many drivers, but I would say their customers are asking them now, and that is a real motivation.
Yeah, no, definitely, I would agree. Claire, have you got anything you want to add into that?
Well, you've kind of said a lot there, Jo. You've
Sorry.
reeled off a full list, which is fine. I think I would add to it that there is an increasing pressure to acknowledge all stakeholders. So not just, you know, we're moving away from shareholders to stakeholders, and more businesses are recognizing that. So seeing the benefits of the wider community and the impact of being more responsible and seeing the benefit of that to communities, to people, both inside and outside of the organisation. I think that's a big driver. I think we've also got a lot of standards now, a lot of badges, if you like. And again, like you, Jo, sometimes it doesn't really matter what the drivers are as long as they're on the journey. But I think we're seeing more and more people go for B Corp. You know, we are a small business. We are currently going through that process. I know you are already B Corp certified, Jo. So things like B Corp, things like the Better Health at Work Awards, these are all awards that are getting people to think more about what responsible business looks like. And actually, I also think now there is an acceptance, which is a good thing, that it's okay to make a profit as long as we're doing something good with that. And I think that's been a big shift in how people think and why people are starting to become more responsible in the business that they do.
Yeah, and I think that's reflected in the rise in the number of companies now that are registering themselves as social enterprises and community interest companies. And I know, Karen, I'm going to throw to you to answer that question last but not least.
Thank you. Yeah. Just to add to what Claire and Jo have said, you know, from our experience, the organisations that we've worked with, some of the drivers that started them off on this journey, if you like, have been more regulatory, to be honest, depending on what sector they're working in. Some of the regulatory bodies that oversee what goes on within that sector are almost compelling people to operate, you know, in a certain way. There's definitely a moral dimension here as well. And organisations, I think, are increasingly recognising that it's really important for their customers and their colleagues that their values aligned. So customers want to spend their money with organisations that they feel share their values. So, you know, again, I think that adds into why do organisations say set themselves up as a social enterprise or a cooperative? It's because there is a bit of a competitive advantage there. It marks them out as being something slightly different, but there's definitely, particularly if I look at this through an inclusion lens, and EDI being a bit of a hot topic, something we see in the press, you know, quite regularly, stories with that kind of EDI angle. I think there's definitely a societal pressure for companies to operate in a certain way so that their colleagues, their customers are values aligned. And as has been said previously, there's definitely a retention element there in terms of retaining good staff, retaining good customers. So there's a few different drivers, but as everybody said, it's all really doesn't matter what the starting point is, as long as the end result is something that's better in the bigger scheme of things.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Karen. Okay, I'm going to pose a question to Jo now, just kind of building on some of the kind of frameworks that we've discussed. So how do you think an environmental management system and the kind of investors in environment accreditation, how does that help a business embed sustainability into its wider responsible business strategy and deliver real business, investor and social value? Social value
So
being a big
the
topic.
so I could talk about investors in the environment all day. It's one of my
That's a separate
favorite
webinar.
topics. Yeah, that and waste management. When she get me started, why I love investors in the environment so much. It's really holistic. So we look at every element of the organization, but we do it on a staged approach. So because we start at bronze, silver and go up to green level accreditation, it means how we say it is we meet you where you are. So if you have got a really well established environmental management system in place, at happy days we come in and we look at how that fits in that framework of accreditation. But more often than not, we start with organisations that are right at the start of the journey, and they'll say, I really want to do something, but I don't know where to start, and so we help them. But what we do is anything we ask for, and this sets us apart from other accreditations, we've got templates, they've got a trained advisor to talk to, and they get an annual audit. So it's really holistic. We look at data, we look at governance and policies, we look at action plans, we look at communication, we look at the wider environmental projects that includes staff wellbeing and conservation, and communication as well. So that's another really important part of the audit. So super wide-ranging in-depth look at an organization, but super approachable as well, which is really important. So it is I just think it works so well. We have organisations who are charities like Rebecca on the call here. We have really small charities, larger charities, manufacturing companies, large companies, NHS trusts, right up to county council. So it works at any sort of level of organisation, but because of that holistic look, it really helps organisations see the opportunities across the spectrum of full ESG. So it's not just sustainability, it's a really useful tool. We have some fantastic feedback.
You were saying there that a lot of organisations are at the start of their journey, but actually, have you been into organisations where they are a bit further on maybe, but because they're not doing it through a recognised sustainability framework, they've kind of been doing ad hoc stuff?
Yeah,
Have you?
tons of organisations, when you go in and they'll say, oh yeah, we're right at the start, we've not done anything. And then actually when you start having conversations and you go through the accreditation criteria, they'll go, oh yeah, no, we do that. Oh yeah, we're already doing that. So so what I always say is it's about formalising all of those processes they already do and make sure it's part of a proper system that everyone in the organization knows how. Again, like when I'm working with clients, I say write your environmental management system and write your manual as almost like a how-to guide, so that if you win the lottery and you don't come back next week, somebody can come in, pick up and say, all right, yeah, they're the resources we use, that's how we measure them, that's how we manage them, and this is the things we're doing to reduce them, and this is how we're compliant, and this is how we let everybody know. So it's a real like how-to guide. So yeah, there's loads of organisations, most organisations I would say I work with are doing something around all of these agendas that we're talking about today. They've just not formalised it, and therefore not everybody in the organisation will know about it or be working to the same system. So I think that's key to it.
Yeah, I think we've definitely found that as an organisation as well. It's just there's often a lot more being done than people are aware, but they just haven't collated it. And I think with that in mind, I'm going to ask Claire Blunt. So where does mental health and wellbeing fit in that responsible business conversation? Like, what does it mean beyond kind of getting, just policies put in place and kind of metrics looked at?
Well, I think it starts with people. I think every business has to start with its people. So we need to be looking at health and well-being, and in particular, mental health, I believe. And I think that's because we need to stop seeing them as different strands. We need to see this as actually fundamental to how people perform and how businesses perform as well, because actually it's about how does a business show up every day? How is a business designing its work, designing its strategy to better reflect in people and also to minimize any risk to people? So I think we've seen it again, seen quite a shift recently, not as much of a shift as I would like. But if we think about the health and safety executive and their guidelines, they're now very clear on work-related stress, and that should actually be part of their a fundamental part of risk assessment. And businesses actually who want to be responsible need to be looking at what those 6 standards are in terms of risk assessments when it comes to workload. But I think also it fits in because we need to accept that actually people don't leave what's happening for them at the office door when they come to work. There's a lot of pressure on people outside of work. If we forget work for a second and just think what's going on in people's lives, think about the cost of living, think about the political turmoil that the world seems to be in and how people are feeling affected by that. People concerned about their health. There's lots of things going on for people who then also have to come into work every day, whether that's into an office or working from home. And I think a business that recognizes that and normalizes conversations around how people are feeling, which is hard because it's a bit wishy-washy and it's quite hard to measure. But actually a business who can say, we are creating a culture where we have an open door policy here and we can normalize conversations about how people feel and recognize that there's stuff going on at home, and how are we designing work to minimize any extra stress that we may or may not be putting onto people. So I think the conversation really fits in around health and safety, if nothing else. I think we have to think that leaders, really kind of business leaders, need to be accountable not just for performance of people, but actually for the environment within which that performance has taken place. So what are businesses doing to make the workplace healthier, safer, for everybody really? And I think it's about normalizing support, because that helps to then reduce stigma around mental health concerns, because we're still not quite sure how to talk about mental health. We talk about mental illness and we load it with stigma, and we don't talk about mental health and actually how we all have it. And without doing that, we're going to lose people. More and more people need to see, or want to see, I think, Karen, you just alluded to it, more people want to choose employers who are going to take care of them and who are environmentally responsible, which creates a much safer, healthier work environment where actually the outcomes are going to speak for themselves. You're going to get better recruitment, you're going to get better retention, you're going to get less burnout, you're going to get better reputation. If you invest in people and understand what that means, then you are definitely on your journey to becoming a more responsible employer. And I think I could talk about it a lot longer, a bit like Joe. I'm very passionate about this. And I think when it comes to responsible business, what we're seeing definitely at Venture Zero is a lot of people talking about sustainability, but what they mean is environmental sustainability. And actually there needs to be a shift to looking at human sustainability, and actually how can we could sign up to standards, we can join, create frameworks to get people on that environmental journey. But if we're not considering how people feel about that and what it means for them, we're not going to take them along on that journey with us. And all of that for me comes under health and well-being, and in particular people's mental health. I'm going to kind of stop there because I will keep going.
Well, I'm going to just ask another question because it's kind of linked to what you've just said around, because earlier on and then I'm going to pop to Karen. So just a bit more on Claire quickly, just about sustainable well-being and that human sustainability. So what does that look like for a business, kind of bringing all of that together?
Well, I think it's about understanding environmental pressures and social pressures that people have, and understanding how all of those things are absolutely intrinsically linked. So looking at it as a whole system, not looking at things in silos. Because the reality is, if we can engage people in one area, whether that's environment, the actions, because that's what it's about. We can raise as much awareness as we want, but actually what we really want is for people to take action, to make things happen, to make the world a better place, to make people thrive, to make money. It's all about action. But if we can take action on environment, that gives people pride, that can reduce climate anxiety, which we know is an increasing problem. It can make people feel that they can make a difference in their part of the world, and that improves health and well-being. A lot of those actions around environment, if I just stick with that one, have a positive impact on families and communities because we can get involved in actions that support that as well. If we think about flexible hybrid ways of working, which are staying with us, you know, a lot of people are preferring to work from home or in this hybrid way. It creates a better sense of well-being because it fits in with people's lives. It allows people to spend more time with their family and with their community. It also reduces carbon emissions because we've got less people getting in the car and traveling into work. So there's a really simple example of how we can get a little win in each place. And I think when we talk about sustainable well-being, it's just about not trading one off for the other. So not saying actually this budget is just to be spent on some training around carbon literacy. That's fine if it does because we deliver that, so that's okay. But realistically, it's not just about we've got a budget just to spend on this. It's about, well, if we spend it on this, how can we then take people along? How can we improve our communities? What else can we do with this budget that supports all those different areas? So seeing it as a joined up approach, which is actually what people want, because people will notice if if a company is promoting well-being and they're putting some money into that, but then they're ignoring inequality and how people feel excluded from some of those activities that are on offer, or a company who's talking about values and is investing in various things around the environment and sustainability, but then actually reward unsustainable behavior because we're putting pressure on people to do extra things or the workload is unsustainable. So actually people are not sustainable within that business. So I think we delivered a talk, if you like, for Children's Cancer North towards the end of last year, I think it was, and we talked about ESG and CSR. And we made the analogy that ESG is like the brains and the head, but CSR is about the heart. And I think if we can look at it in that way and see how we can intrinsically link those people, remember that people are at those areas and people are at the heart of it, I think that's where we get the most responsible business. And to your point, asking about why is it beyond perks and policies? And I've seen, you know, a well-being app isn't going to help if people still feel excluded from decisions that are being made within the business, or if people are being told to go on some training about environment, or they're being told this is the latest policy on their environmental sustainability, but they don't fully understand how they can be part of that. So I think for me, sustainable well-being is remembering all of those three parts and how can people be involved in all three of them.
Thank you. And to bring Karen into the conversation, has been patiently waiting. Let's talk about inclusion. Like, why must inclusion be part of responsible business and any responsible business strategy?
I think it just follows on so nicely from what Claire was saying there in terms of, you know, seeing things in the round and not treating these as siloed subject areas. You know, if when you join these things up, I think it's a much more authentic way of talking about these from an organizational perspective. Exactly like Claire said, if as an employee you're seeing a certain amount of investment or a certain amount of attention being given to a specific subject area, that can sometimes signal that maybe that's the hot topic of the moment. You know, that's the shiny new toy, and the spotlight's gone off other areas. So looking at these three areas, looking at inclusion, looking at sustainability, looking at employee well-being in the round in a holistic way is a much more joined up, authentic commitment. It demonstrates a much more joined up, authentic commitment to people. And we've seen some great examples of organizations spending time investing in this, in that joined up way, and getting a real traction with colleagues, because the skills and behaviors that add value in one add value across the board here. So if you're encouraging people to have a learning curiosity about the diverse communities that they live in, or to keep an open mind and keep on top of what's happening in the world around them, because that helps them to be more inclusive of colleagues from different parts of the world. All of those skills add value in other areas. So we've seen some really great results from people putting a little bit of investment into joining these things up and explaining to people in a really clear, enjoyable, engaging way that the skills and behaviours that add value in one add value across the piece. So there's so many benefits there from looking at it in a much more of a joined up way.
Yeah. And what kind of cultural behaviours do you see in an organisation that actually show that they're kind of committed to inclusive practice?
I think consistency. You know, I think when we go and work with organisations, we go into an organisation for the first time, exactly as Joe was saying, you know, sometimes people will say, oh, but, you know, we don't do very much about ADI here. You know, they're a bit reluctant and they feel a little bit nervous about what we're going to say about them or reflect back to them. And actually, what you find is that there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more inclusive practice. People are behaving in a much more inclusive way than they might at first realise. But what really signals that it's important to customers, to colleagues, to the broader community, I suppose, is that consistency. You know, is there a statement or a commitment being made by the organisation to operate in an inclusive way or operate in a responsible way that they then follow up with action? So it's not just about the words on the page. It's not just about a wonderful statement on a website or on your social media channels. Is that represented day to day in how that business cracks on? So that consistency, I think, is the really important bit.
Yeah. And where do you think, and I'll start with you, Cameron, I'm going to pose this question to all three of you, like, where does leadership fit into this? Like, how important is it?
It's definitely a critical factor. And you know, it's not just because, I suppose, leaders are often the people who have the budgetary control or you know, they're able to direct the business in a certain way. I think what we've seen is that leaders really role model behaviours, and people look to the leaders within an organisation to set the tone and to establish what is acceptable to go on and what is not acceptable to go on. So, you know, having that leadership commitment, that buy-in at the top really does help to embed that responsible business mindset throughout the organisation. You know, and it helps it to show up in terms of recruitment or the supply chain or what the website says or what your induction process says or whatever. And I think, you know, what we refer to this, it's a bit of an 80s reference, I suppose, but we do refer to this as the Bananarama principle. That I know. It isn't just what you do, it's how you do it, and that's what gets results. You know, that's the old Bananarama song.
Love
Needs to be a
banana.
strap line.
The banana. So it is, you know, it's not just about, Claire mentioned the policies, it's not about words on a page, it's how you bring that to life. And leaders have got such a massive responsibility for translating that and setting the tone for the rest of the organisation.
Yeah. And Joe, I think you mentioned you work with a lot of charitable organisations, but you also do work with some, you know, within the NHS and you know, corporate clients as well. Do you find there's a difference between maybe leaders within that VCSE sector and their kind of appetite to get behind something like investors in environment versus, say, a more corporate client?
No, and do you know what? Again, like one of my favourite things is working with the voluntary sector, and we've got the second stage of the Going Green Together project across the North East region, so that's funded through National Lottery. So we work with quite a few voluntary sector organisations, and they're very inspiring. What sets them apart, I would say, a key part of the IIE accreditation criteria is senior leadership buy-in. It's imperative in order to drive change across an organisation. Historically, larger organisations would get a sustainability person in, and they would be given no authority, no money, and sent away to go and implement a strategy and save money and do this, that, and the other and it was a bit demoralising. And so that's one of the reasons why it is a key part of our accreditation criteria that policy is signed off at senior leadership board level, and we're really looking for a demonstration that it's got board buy-in for sure. So the voluntary sector, one of their key strengths, people first, always, but also they're not just inward looking. So lots of corporate organisations can be quite inward looking, get their own processes in place, make sure they're really efficient and save money. They want to really achieve the metrics in terms of resource reduction and all of that. Like, they do some fantastic stuff. I would say the strength of the voluntary sector is they're all about getting their own house in order, doing all the fantastic stuff, and how do we share it? How do we get that message out there? How do we work with other voluntary sector organisations? How do we spread the message? That's and a lot of their project delivery and additional environmental activities they do as part of the IIE, it's always outward facing, it's always working with communities. I had a little tear in an audit a couple of months ago where they showed me this video where they'd been working with children, and it pulled at all of the right heartstrings for me, but it was all like doing crafty art activities using nature and trying to get kids to think about their place in the environment. So they're all really outward looking. It's really inspiring what they do. So exactly the same drivers though, the same resource use, the same need to reduce, to make themselves leaner so that they're spending their money on helping the people they want to help rather than pay the ever increasing electricity bills. So the same drivers, the same resource issues, not having a dedicated sustainability person very often, fitting it into an already busy day job. It's all the same as a smaller organisation. The larger organisations, imperative again that it comes from the top. Slightly different challenges in terms of they're reaching a lot more people. So there's very often bringing 5,000 staff along on your journey in an NHS trust, for example, is a lot more difficult than a team of 20, and being able to embed, like, you're all speaking in one office, you've got one waste management system, you know, like it's a lot more difficult for the smaller sustainability teams in larger organisations, I would say, just to get everybody on the same page, doing the same system, using what they're trying to implement, getting across why they're doing it. You know, not everybody has that knowledge either in a larger organisation. So different challenges, but voluntary and corporate, to me, I treat them exactly the same, other than same challenges and everything. It's just, I would say the voluntary sector have just got a little bit of sparkle in terms of their outward facing, working with communities, and yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, okay, great. And just building on something that Karen said about hot topics, I'm going to throw this to Claire because I know this is a bugbear. And I think, you know, between the areas that we're all talking about here, we could probably all say, you know, this has been flavour of the month. Oh, am I still there? Drives kind of queries and inquiries, etc. But how do we prevent that? How do we kind of like stop kind of a business going, right, we've just got to do mental health first aid now, for example, because everybody's talking about it and it's going to tick that box?
I think I was just looking at some of the, as you were talking there, Joe, looking at some things that people had put in the chat earlier on, and I think it comes down to a lot of that stuff. It's about having those strong ethics, good values, and being clear on why the business is doing what it's doing. I think being very transparent. So actually, if there is a new if there is a new topic and there's a hot topic and people want to dive in it because it looks good, that's not a bad thing to get involved in the next new thing, but be transparent about why that's the case. Why are you talking about that now? And looking for the value. And I think as long as businesses or leaders in particular, which is what we were talking about, ask that question, the same question every time with, about impact. So what is the impact of this decision going to be on health and wellbeing, community and environment? What is the impact of this decision on getting involved in this? What is the impact going to be around our values? Are we compromising on that in some way? And trying to just keep coming back and being true to what it is that the business has actually set out to do as a responsible business. And I think it is a bugbear of mine because people do jump from one thing to the other, and it's really hard as a business to try and keep up with that. For me, it always just comes back to people at the heart of it. What is going to keep your people? What is going to make you purposeful? What is going to make you profitable? And understanding the impact that a decision will make on all of those parts. Just this week, somebody commented to me, they've had a lot of training in their organization. They've had some training in their organization around environment, which is brilliant. Relatively small team. They wanted to take their team through on that journey to understand why they're making the decisions that they're making, why they're getting involved in sustainability, why they're making it a really fundamental part of their business agenda. And that's a good thing. I had a conversation with them about mental health and well-being and investing in some training around that with their people as well. And the enthusiasm wasn't there. And it was, well, we'll train a couple of people. And it's sort of that question, what have you asked that question about the impact that just training a couple of people around understanding mental health and the concerns that people have and how we can better support people will have on them when you're actually saying, but we'll train everybody on what we believe is important around the environment. So I think it's constantly asking the question, what is the impact going to be if I don't do this? What is the impact going to be if we do make this decision? How can we be transparent about that? And is it actually fundamentally going to feed our values and our ethics and what we believe is right as a responsible business? Or is it just going to tick a box?
Yeah.
Lots of people tick boxes.
Yeah, I think the tick boxing thing is difficult. Karen, do you find that with your work that it's can be a tick box exercise, or is there a bigger, more the word I'm looking for, like an ethical driver behind it?
I think we must be very no. I was going to answer that in quite a negatively framed way, so I'll start again. So, I think it's fair to say, particularly in the inclusion side of things, if there's been a bit of a new story, or something that's quite a well-known incident, or something that people are aware of in the media, then that can drive a little bit more interest, and people are curious or nervous, or they want to make sure that they respond to that in the right way, and all of that's coming from a really positive place. I think that the key is, as Claire said, is sometimes about making sure that that positive intent turns into positive impact. So, those conversations can start, and it's great to get that tin opener, and great, somebody wants to make an inquiry or go down the journey, or be a bit more reflective about something because of something they've seen in the press. Absolutely brilliant. The key is just making sure that that well-intended inquiry decision from the organization turns into something that has a positive impact for their people, for their community, for their customers. And I think the conversations that we sometimes get into, it is about making sure that whatever people decide to do, whatever decision they take as a business, that it's values aligned, that it fits within the framework of who they are as an organization, what they set out to do, what they're all about. And that means that it isn't confusing or distracting for colleagues and customers.
Yeah. And Joe, how much do you think for organisations like being seen to do the right things? Obviously, we've talked about IEE as an accreditation, and there's Claire mentioned the Better Health at Work Awards before, but there are lots of awards and accolades that businesses and organisations can go for.
I've got most of them.
How important is it flipping that round as a responsible business to be, again, using that word transparent, to say, actually, this wasn't right for us, or we did this and we did it badly, or this didn't work, or whatever? Do you think that's something that's missing from the conversation?
I think the nature of our role within organisations, and I just audited an organisation this morning, and I said, like, we are like an extension of your sustainability team, so we're the outside eye and the support, and highlighting what's brilliant, and then next time the continual improvement bit, which is what we try and bring in, how we can make it better. So it's not about bashing anybody or shaming anybody. It's about, right, next time, if we did it like this, it would be better. Have you considered? And the beauty of getting an auditor in, they're looking at things with fresh eyes, so sometimes you just haven't spotted that policy doesn't align with that one. It's just something like that, or something you think's on the website that's the right version, it's actually not, something like that. But that outside eye is, we're auditing tons of organizations all the time, so we're bringing learning from all of them as well. So it's like, it's nobody's perfect. Even an organization with as many accreditations as Jeannie's got, and like, we love an accreditation only because, well, A, we deliver investors in the environment, so we have to have it, but it's more, we went for B Corp because it really aligned with our values, it sets us apart, but also I bang the drum for SMEs, so I don't want, because you're small, and again, like working with the small and mighty charities that we do, and the small businesses, it's about, just because you're small doesn't mean you can't demonstrate to the outside world that this is how you can operate, and you can turn a profit, and you can look after your staff, and you can do things for the wider community. So I think accreditations are a really good way of demonstrating to the outside world. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure, but they're just a really good mechanism of being able to demonstrate, but hold yourself accountable. Is it important to highlight what you've done wrong? No, it's important to work towards putting it right and to be better every time, and that continual improvement bit is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I heard a great kind of one-liner from a podcast I was listening to this week, and it was about, it's not about kind of failing or winning, it's about either succeeding or learning. And I thought that was a really kind of great way of framing something, actually. So I'm going to start using that. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to ask you all three of you, just one last question. And then I want to leave a couple of minutes open for any of the audience to ask their questions. So starting with Claire, if an organisation was going to take one small step tomorrow, what would you suggest that be? Or even today, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, it could be today.
One small step.
Or a big step.
Or a big step.
Step in the right direction.
I would say, what would I say? Take action. I think take some action, make some difference. Think about, are people understanding? So maybe do almost like a little audit for yourself. What do my people need to know for me to be able to take them on this journey with me as an organization, which is around education, isn't it? So I think I would really seriously think about, this is where I want to be as a responsible business. How do I engage my people on that journey with me? So I think I would start with that.
Yeah. Okay.
That question.
Karen, what about yourself? What would your big or small, today or tomorrow, action be?
I would say it's almost like a micro step. because it doesn't matter whether it's a big step or a small step, any step in the right direction is progress. And exactly as you were saying before there, Claire, with your podcast quote, you know, it is about progress and not perfection sometimes in this space. I think what's a really interesting thing for organizations to consider is something like your induction process, for example. So most organizations of a reasonable size have some kind of formal induction process that just, you know, beds somebody into the organization, settles them in. And it's really interesting, I think, sometimes, particularly if you've been at that place for a long time and your induction was quite some time ago, you know, go back to that induction process and just have a look at it with a fresh pair of eyes, as Joanne was saying. And is your ethos as a responsible business, how is it represented in that induction process? Because I think sometimes that gets a bit lost. And that's a really important start. That's you're setting your stall out as an employer as to what it's going to be like to work at X company. So is your commitment to being a responsible business, how is it translated and represented? Is it represented strongly and accurately enough within your induction process? And if it's not, that's quite an easy thing to fix, but it's a bit of a mistrick if it's not.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Jo, what about yourself?
So I would obviously say you should sign up to Investors in the Environment. Not joking though, because we really do handhold you through the process. So we'll take you through the whole thing. Anything we ask for, we'll give you a template. I just think it works for any size of organisation. If you didn't want to do that, then I would start with thinking about measuring. Start with one thing, so you could start with electricity or start with gas, but measuring, you can't manage what you don't measure. So having an idea of what you're using as an organisation in terms of energy or waste. Waste is a really effective tool to use, especially when you're thinking about staff engagement. But start thinking about measuring one thing and having an idea of what you use it for, and then have a think about how you can reduce it. I would start there, because you'd be surprised when you start thinking about it like that how you'll pull in different elements of operational, policy, procurement, waste, all of the different areas. So yeah, maybe do that, but IIE helps you through all of that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to stop there with my questions for the panel, and I'm going to give you, if anyone's still got their camera off and you want to come on, if you're happy to, then do feel free. I'm going to ask the audience if anyone has got any questions that they want to ask any of our panelists this afternoon. And if not, I've got a question for you all. I can hear somebody's come off mute. Go on, Anne. I knew you'd have a question. Go on, Anne.
I know, you know what I'm like. You know what can you hear me all right?
Yes, yeah,
go on. In an office where I'll just check my volume. Great. So yeah, no, that's been really useful, because it just gives everything, it just pulls it all together into one, you know, area for us to consider and how we can take this back to our organisations. But a lot of I've experiences like how like sometimes you've got to take risk, but then sometimes you've got to take responsibility for where things haven't got right. So taking, you know, looking at the lessons that we'll learn from taking risk and applying that, because we're not all experts in everything, but I think it's just all about just putting my hands up and saying, yeah, I'm taking responsibility for that and we need to change it.
Yeah. What challenges are you seeing now where you work in getting kind of maybe leadership buy-in or what have you?
Yeah, no, the leadership, you know, it's very clear, which is, you know, there's lots of goals and objectives around the environment, and of course certification's one of those goals. But yeah, I think it's just needs to be realised. So it's that cascade. It's cascade from top to bottom and then back up to the top. So it's, you know, consultation's really important.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Anne. Does anybody else have any kind of comments they want to share or any questions they want? A minute left before 1:30.
I would just say on Anne's comment there, that team approach is we really encourage a green team within an organisation, and getting members across your organisation to be part of that is key. And I would imagine that's the same with mental health and the same with EDI, because you get such a different input from different people's roles. Somebody like with a sustainability mind cannot possibly know, especially in a larger organisation, all of the different operational problems and issues. And so and like we've said, I think that's the theme of the meeting, is it's people. Keep your people on board, engage them, get them bought in, get them giving you ideas. They're absolutely key for delivery, for the success of any management system.
Just to add to that, Joe, I think we do hear about the green teams, and we hear about the mental health teams, and I'm sure there's the EDI teams and all of these sort of champions that we see. But none of those teams will be successful, and none of the agendas will be successful unless you do get the buy-in. And I think what we always try to say to people is, ask the question, what are your people's hooks? Everybody will have a different hook. So you might be really focused as a green team member, but actually, how do you recruit more people into that agenda? So thinking about what is the hook for somebody, because actually environmental sustainability is huge, seems a long way off, and a lot of people struggle to buy into the need, especially with the current political, narrative that we're being drawn. It's very, very difficult. But actually, it might be a priority for someone around finance. So if you're encouraging people to share travel, it could be how that will save them money by not putting as much petrol in the car, or how it's cheaper to take the bus or to walk, because let's say if we walk, that's going to be really good for their mental health, and actually their hook might be around their health or the need to lose weight or whatever it is. So always try and think, that's all we mean on even at that micro level, Karen, as you mentioned, how do we get people to think in this joined up way? Those little hooks, those little wins that one simple action can have in all three or however many different areas, and not thinking about it as one agenda, but seeing the whole system.
Yeah, and I think that you're so right, Claire. And I think just linking that back to what Anne was saying about leadership and learning from mistakes when risks are taken, I think one of the really great ways that we've seen people buy into these agendas and get involved or get interested has been when leaders show authenticity and a little bit of vulnerability, even that they're on a bit of a learning journey with some of this. So, when they share little examples of things that they might have done and why that they were motivated to do that and what the positive impact from that has been, just having that ability to be a little bit vulnerable, because we don't all know everything. So we've seen some great traction buy-in when you get some well-known people throughout the business just to kind of share a few little anecdotes or a few little examples. So yeah, having that authenticity can really help to find those hooks.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm conscious of time. We've got 2 minutes to go. So I'd just like to say thank you to our panel for giving us their insights, and thank you for everyone who's joined us this lunchtime. We have produced a guide between the organisations, so we'll get that over to you in your email boxes